Deadline day extravaganza. The Marlins basically rebuild in a day. There's still 5 minutes to go as we hit record on this episode. We're going to break down all the deals that have happened so far. There's still 5 minutes, so more can happen live. Tons to get into. Absolutely tons. This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to a Deadline Day special of Locked on Marlins. With me, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. Thanks for making Locked on Marlins your first listen, perhaps your second listen if you've already tuned into the episode earlier. This is your team every day and part of the Locked On Podcast Network. There is a YouTube channel as well. Hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. Join me. You are watching. You will see the UK GOAT is here. The annual Deadline buzzer appearance from Sean Barrett. SB, how are we doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Pete. This is definitely the second one we've done for sure. I'm not sure about the year before. I can't remember. But yeah, this is extravaganza is the right word. This is absolutely crazy right now. This is the busiest I've seen the Marlins in a deadline in as far back as I can actually physically remember. So, there are names dropping out left, right, and centre, and obviously multiple names coming back in as well. So, exciting day. You don't get many at the moment for the Marlins, so
no,
certainly take it.
No, this is going to be the 2024 defining date, no doubt about it. Which we called out to say this is Bendix's time, and absolutely he is. Listen, he's made moves. How those moves pan out, the future will tell us, but he has made moves. This episode is sponsored by good friends over at PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Sean, we're going to start at the top. We are now 3 minutes to the official deadline. So at any point, we may need to just do an emergency reaction. But let's start with the first deal of the day in Trevor Rogers. Firstly, your take on Trevor being moved specifically. Obviously, a couple of years of control. He's been serviceable is how I would describe this year. He's been fine. But what was your feeling on him being moved generally at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You said serviceable, and if you look at the numbers, that's exactly what he looks like right now. What I would say is, if you look at the last 10 to 12 starts, he's been far better than serviceable. So that's been
true.
He obviously isn't a rental. 2.5 years, as you said, of control. Depends on where you look at the Marlins as far as competitive level for the next couple of years. Are the Marlins really going to compete in the next 2 years? Maybe. I mean, we'll get into that as we talk about some of the trades and certainly the returns, especially even in the Rogers one. We've got two guys coming back that are going to be in the major leagues right now. I'm not surprised that they traded Rogers, but I am surprised that they got immediate return as far as major league level bats, because when you trade a guy like Rogers, you're basically saying we're punting his value for the next 2 years because we're not going to compete for 2 years. But then they bring guys that are going to come straight into the major. So it's a bit of a not a questionable decision. I think it's the right move to do. I think Rogers at this point is going to be in a better place for himself. Obviously, a team going to the playoffs. But yeah, the Marlins moving on from him, I thought made sense. I thought he was probably going to move at the deadline. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, me too. No surprises, I'd say, that Trevor's moved. It felt like the time to move him. And considering the market, the amount of buyers, the lack of pitching, the pitching injuries we've seen this year, like it made total sense. In terms of the return, the two guys specifically, I must say Twitter was ablaze before I headed off to a tennis match. Hit record on an emergency pod, but man, oh man, the feeling was that the Marlins absolutely nailed this deal. Two prospects back, Connor Norby and also Kyle Stowers, or Stowers, depending on the pronunciation, TBC on that one. Both have big league experience. Norby particularly hit a home run just recently in the series against the Marlins, so we've seen him up close and personal. Your reaction to those two guys specifically?
Yeah, well, firstly, when the trade came through, it was Norby, and that was it. That was the one name that we got. And I thought it was a bit light. I thought it didn't exactly excite me. That's not any knock on Norby. It's actually these numbers look pretty good. It just I expected to see a little bit more. And then of course Stylist comes in and you realise actually he's arguably maybe the better of the two players. So the return for the Marlins is in my eyes at least fantastic. I think it's high, but it's fair. I think any time that someone trades with the Marlins and the deal is fair, it's considered high because you usually see the Marlins get cooked in trades. So this is a really good deal. These are two exciting, powerful bats that the Marlins can plug into the lineup right now. So it's weird that the return that they got in this trade at least is leaving them a more exciting team now than they were before, which is strange when you think about selling and rebuilding. You used to having to wait for that return, but in this trade at least, the Marlins seem to have got two bats that are going to be immediate major league returns, and for fans, that's you can't ask for anything more. You've got two youngish guys that are going to be putting up performances that excite.
Yeah, this is kind of the zig to the zag from what we've seen earlier with the moves. Like it felt like we're stockpiling teenagers, and at the draft we're stockpiling teenagers, and then all of a sudden the deadlines come around and Bendix has flipped the script on this one, and all of a sudden we've got two guys that are on the 40-man. So you question where are they going to report to? I mean, we'll see. But all of a sudden Brian De La Cruz moved. Is Stowers going to be straight onto the big league roster? I mean, why not? I don't know. We'll see, I guess. So that's a decision to be made. But yeah, that is to your point there, Sean. All of a sudden, a few guys returned here, are guys that are going to be either on the roster now or very, very soon, and that is not what we were expecting. And some projectable guys. So very interesting first move. Marlins Twitter absolutely giving this one the thumbs up. Josh Bell equally was traded. He was on waivers. The Marlins get lucky here, where the Diamondbacks, they have an injury, and all of a sudden they're scrambling around for a first baseman. Josh Bell fits the profile perfect. They get cash back effectively. They get half the money back on Bell. They would have happily eaten the money and taken a prospect, but looks like they took no prospect, but saved $2.5 million. So, that isn't the most exciting deal. That's a Bendix, that's a Bruce Sherman deal. That's not one really for the fans. Nevertheless, $2.5 saved, into Bruce's back pocket, all good for him. But nevertheless, they moved Bell. Looking back on Bell's tenure with the Marlins, what an impact he had in 23, though, by the way. And, it was just what the Marlins needed at that point. I'm very interested to see if this propels the Diamondbacks actually forward and, gives their offense a little bit of a boost. I don't know. But Josh Bell, for me, the ultimate professional, delivered when it mattered for the Marlins straight after that trade. He seems to come alive in the second half, though, right? So that's just Josh Bell's MO. So we wish him well in Arizona, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He came in and did a job. I saw his overall stats get tweeted out in his Marlins tenure, and it's just below replacement level. And let's be honest, the Marlins probably would have preferred him not opt in for this year. But that's what you take when you trade a guy that's already got the option. The Marlins knew that he was more than likely going to pick it up, especially given how poorly he performed before the Marlins picked him up. But yeah, in the Marlins jersey in 2023, really did a job. And the Marlins' success that they had wasn't solely off the back of him, but that Bell Burger sort of boost that they got at the deadline really did boost the team. So, it's I'm not sorry to see him go because obviously the performance and the money there. But overall, if you ask me in 10 years' time what my memory of Bell would be, is that playoff run. So absolutely. Hopefully he can do a similar thing somewhere else because ultimately it doesn't affect the Marlins, whoever makes the playoffs. So
yeah, absolutely on that one. I think let's hit the ads, and then I want to come back and get into probably the Rogers return definitely is up there, but I think the headline piece that Marlins had to sell that was most sought after, Tanner Scott ending up with the Padres. So let's break down that one as well as JT Chargois and Brazoban. So the bullpen has been absolutely rinsed here for the Marlins. There's still a few minutes left to go. Well, we're 5 minutes over, but officially the deadline has passed, but there's still deals that are going to trickle in. So anything drops, we can add to this list here. But let's get into it first of all and let you know about our good friends over at SupplyHouse. Who's in the house? Yes, SupplyHouse. And guys, hold on, wrong script. SupplyHouse.com. You can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? No problem. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Welcome back to a deadline special of Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. We are reacting to the trades that have already happened and may continue to happen. We're 7 minutes past the official deadline, but the administrative work still continues, the paperwork to be submitted. I must say, if there's a deal to be done, my expectations were it would center around Andrew Nardi, so we'll wait and see if anything's done in that one. He's pretty much the only reliever left in the pen, as well as Anthony Bennett and Declan Cronin, another guy that has been talked about a lot. So I can still see the Marlins getting 1 or 2 more deals in here. It's absolutely insane. Sean, let's keep it going chronologically. I've kind of got the rundown in a slightly the wrong order here. Let's flex into JT Chargois, which happened after Bell, but before Scott and Hoeing. Chargois ends up going to the Mariners, so the Marlins and Mariners hook up on a deal. A lot of rumors around Jazz to the Mariners, but they end up swapping JT Chargois for an arm. Finally, they've got an arm back. It feels like they've been prioritizing sticks galore, but they end up getting minor league right-hander Will Schomburg back. By all accounts, he didn't rank among the Mariners' top 30 prospects per MLB pipeline, but the reality is, with those prospect lists, they kind of are meaningless at this point. They're not updated. So anything you've seen on Schomburg that excites you at this point, and what are the Marlins going to expect from him?
It's a tough one, isn't it? He's a 23-year-old who's in the low A. Bit of a surprise. I kind of like Chargois. I think he's done a decent job at times for the Marlins. They've ultimately got a lottery ticket back. The guy that's got some good strikeouts in the length of innings that he has done, which isn't many. I think he's got just under 100 innings in pro ball. So there's some strikeout stuff there. The walk rate's a bit of a concern. He ultimately is a lottery ticket, shot in the dark prospect. But you never know. I mean, these guys, come from nowhere. Look where the Marlins got Bender from independent ball. So, it's a lottery ticket. So it's not much more you can say about him, to be honest.
No. And the thing is, for Chargois, just to go back to him, he's been really effective this year, and also has a year of control beyond this year. So, I think it feels like the Mariners have added a nice piece. But I must say, I'm pleased that the Marlins have added an arm. They've been prioritizing sticks in all these deals. I think it's good to, and we're going to talk about a few arms now, specifically when we get into the Padres deal. But I think it is good to add some balance, because we're seeing at the deadline, specifically this year, and probably this is the trend that continues with all the injuries that's out there in Major League Baseball. It's the pitchers that are delivering the premium. If you're selling and you've got arms to sell, it's always kind of been the case. But the premium this year seems to be insane, where the bats, less so. The bats are kind of fair market value, not really blockbusters. But again, we look at the Trevor Rogers deal and go, wow. And you look at some of these other deals knocking around and you're a bit like, wow, this is a huge return. And so, I'm glad that the Marlins continue for a team that's, specialize in pitching development. Like, let's just keep adding arms. Swap Chargois. There's no real need for him to be in the bullpen next year. The Marlins probably aren't going to be in the mix. Developmental year. So, yeah, swap him for an arm. Relatively old, I think, for the level, which is the point you're making there, low A at 23. But, that's been effective. Let's get into probably, the one that we were all waiting for, one that we were all, knew was coming in Tanner Scott being moved. The question was where and which team, is going to pay the price. They were asking a huge price by all accounts. It ends up being the Padres, and they end up packaging Brian Hoeing. So the Padres end up acquiring Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing, 2 arms, a lefty and Tanner Scott, a righty and Brian Hoeing, of course. And then the Marlins get back. Here we go. It's a 4-player package here. Lefty pitcher Robbie Snelling, righty Adam Mazur. We then get an infielder, Graham Pauly, and another infielder, Jay Bashirs. So a 4-player package there. And these are guys, at least 3 of them, that are towards the top end of the Padres prospect list. And so some big names here, by all accounts, from the Padres. What did you make of this deal? And, obviously, Scott and Hoeing packaged together. The Marlins getting a little bit of extra value maybe and an extra player out of this one, perhaps. So, yeah, what was your make on this trade overall?
Yeah, I mean, it is a case of the Marlins package 2 relievers together. And for the Padres, it's almost like let's get this done in one deal rather than negotiate with you and then try and get another reliever somewhere else. Obviously, the Marlins were shopping relievers. We knew that. I don't think there's a single player in the bullpen who shouldn't have been receiving calls for. I think it's a case of, they're all available. So the Padres did it all in one lump sum. So it works well for them, and it works well for the Marlins as well, because there's actually quite a lot of excitement about some of these guys for sure. To take a team's 3 of the team's top 15 prospects, that's quite a haul. Obviously, 2 months obviously, the main part of it is Scott. So 2 months of Scott is only going to have so much value. He's an elite player, he's an elite pitcher, but the actual impact that he can have on a team is, you're not expecting top 5 prospects from a team. But to get 3 top 15s, again, one of the guys is actually at the major league level. So surprising. Again, it's a little bit of a mix. Obviously, the Marlins need to fill the 26-man roster with somebody. You can't just deplete the whole team and then expect to be able to put a product on the field. It might not even be a good product, but you've got to put our product on the field. So, these guys are a little bit exciting, so I'm sure we'll get into that a bit.
Yeah, no doubt. It's definitely an interesting mix of guys. The funny thing is, when we think about the Padres more generally and the Marlins, that's 7 guys. Well, 8 guys, sorry, because I forgot to include Go into that. That's 8 guys that the Marlins have got from the Padres this season. Obviously, I think Go more of a salary balance guy, but so I'm going to classify it as 7 specific prospects. So effectively, the Padres have unloaded almost their entire farm, the top end of that in particular, over to the Marlins. And the Padres getting, impact players in Luis Arias, in Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing. I must say, Brian Hoeing, a nice story for the Marlins as well, like being a super versatile dude in general, and whatever was asked of him, he would, put his best foot forward. So proper team guy. Didn't feel like there was much there a few years ago, but had the opportunity, and he always delivered. Super dependable, Brian Hoeing. I feel like his best role, generally, when we reflect on this, is probably that kind of swingman, multi-inning guy out of the pen. I feel like that probably best suits him, although we did some leverage relief and obviously started games too, Sean. So Brian Hoeing, a good piece, but in terms of Tanner Scott particularly, mate, I mean, you have to look back on that deal that was made and the way Tanner Scott has taken his game, not just to the next level, he's taken his game to like 4 levels up from where he was. There was always this type of profile like in there, but the Marlins were able to find the best version of Tanner Scott. I'm very interested to see, a change of environment, a change of situation. Interested to see if Tanner Scott can kind of keep it going. But from what the Marlins saw of him, he's literally has been one of the best relievers in the game. And, we obviously wish him well the rest of the way with the Padres, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year he's been amazing. He's, the walk rate's still a little bit high. So, I mean, ultimately, he's not going to close for the Padres. He's actually going to be their setup man. So, it'd be interesting to see how that difference in role affects him. We know that when you use a closer in a non-closing situation during the season, they tend to not have that juice flowing. And they can struggle. So it'll be interesting to see how he reacts. He probably knew that chances are wherever he got traded, he was going to go to a very good team with a very good closer and might be the setup man. So I think his expectations were probably there anyway, but it's not as just easy as just to walk in and change your role and change that environment. So hopefully, you wish him well. He's always been, a good player for the Marlins. I've not heard a squeak of controversy from him at all. Again, it's when you're a Marlins fan and the seller at the trade deadline, you kind of do get into the habit of once the trades happen, you're like, I'll pay a particular interest in the Padres now. As far as if they make the playoffs, I'll root for them because you've got an ex-Marlin there. So that's something I've got used to. So certainly something I'll be looking forward to.
Yeah, no doubt. We've got an update here. We're 16 minutes after the deadline has passed. We have an update from Craig Mish. The Marlins are done. And so that helps us probably, Sean, in keeping this one to a relatively decent amount of time. We've still got Brian De La Cruz and Huascar Brazoban to dig into. We're going to dig into those guys after the final ad of this one. And firstly, we'll let you know about our good friends over at PrizePicks. Yes, sir. And PrizePicks, of course, is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in, baby. You can win up to 100 times your money. 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Turn $10 into 1,000. And if you like your offers, and today particularly you'd like them, PrizePicks has got you covered every week. On Tuesdays, today is a Tuesday, they lower select player stat projections to help your lineup hit, and you can get your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Friday. So all you have to do is simply download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code, and the code is Locked On MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's Locked On MLB on PrizePicks for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys, welcome back to a deadline special of Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. It's the second year of doing this pretty much live at the deadline with the UK GOAT. And we had a lot of action last year. It was late because we did a whole episode talking about Jake Berger being acquired. And we ended the call, posted the episode, and within 3 minutes, another deal dropped with Josh Bell. Josh Bell going again on the deadline day. That's 2 deadlines. That maybe 3 deadlines in a row, actually, for Josh Bell, that he's been moved. Need to check into that. But I feel like he was moved the year before as well at deadline day. So 3 deadlines in a row for Bell. Nevertheless, we are here digging into all of the moves the Marlins have made. By my calculation, on deadline day specifically, they have moved 7 guys. Rogers, Bell, Scott, Hoeing, Chargois, De La Cruz, and Brazoban. 7 guys. There you go. I had the over-under at 7.5 set this morning. So there you go. I was good. I was on the line. I was on the number there, just about. But Craig Mish declaring that the Marlins are done. Brian De La Cruz. This one I could sense coming for a few days. It felt like this was brewing. 3.5 years of control with Brian De La Cruz, which I think is very interesting with him specifically. But I get the sense that the Marlins were maybe looking to move on from De La Cruz. I do think that Trevor Rogers deal in particular kind of half signaled that in some ways. So Brian De La Cruz eventually moved. Reminder on De La Cruz, acquired at a deadline a few years back for Yimi Garcia. Ended up being a great trade for the Marlins there in terms of value that they got from De La Cruz. He ends up being moved to the Pirates, The Pirates were in on Jazz Chisholm Jr., couldn't get a deal done for him. They continued looking for outfield help, a right-handed stick. I was in touch with some of the Pirates guys a few days ago, and they said, De La Cruz probably would fit nicely for them. The Pirates end up sending 2 prospects back to the Marlins. They send an infielder, Garrett Forrester. He's the number 18 prospect by all accounts, and also another pitcher. So the Marlins getting in some pitchers here. Yoon Seok Shim is the pitcher back. Needs some clarity on that pronunciation, but we'll dig into that. Let's just call it Shim for now. In terms of prospect rankings here, Sean, it's fair to say we should probably be excited in some ways by the infielder Forrester. But also Shim, it appears, looks to be an interesting piece as well from a pitching perspective. So what did you make of this one from De La Cruz being moved to the Pirates?
I'm a bit perplexed, personally.
Okay.
I wasn't shocked by the De La Cruz trade. I think the Marlins clearly have brought in a couple of bats that they're going to take a look at. De La Cruz is a league average bat with below league average defense. So the Marlins were never going to build around him. They were never going to have him as part of the core. So trading him, if there was value out there, made sense. It's just the return to me looks a little bit like, I don't know. I mean, Forster's a young player who's transitioning to catcher. And Shim, again, like we've not really seen much of him over in America. He's come across, 4 appearances at a minor league complex. So I'm intrigued where the Marlins were going with this one. Now, look, they'll have done their research. They'll have done their work. They'll have had scouts looking at these guys, and they know more than what I know, obviously, just looking at a stat page. I mean, ultimately it is a case of the Marlins are going to take a look at these guys, but they're lower on the prospect range. They're not people that we've heard of. Like, obviously the return for Rodgers is obviously massive compared to this. In the sense of like with Stowers. I mean, I know I'm not the barometer on prospects, but if I've heard of a guy, then he must be a reasonably decent prospect. So these guys, again, I'd hasten, because they're so young, to call them lottery tickets. But ultimately, that's kind of what they are. Would I expect more of a return from De La Cruz? I think it'd be unfair to say I should. But yeah, again, these guys, we spoke earlier about the idea that the Marlins are getting major league ready guys, and now this is the complete opposite. But yeah, De La Cruz is ultimately is going to be a 4th outfielder for most teams in the league. So you can't expect a massive return.
Yeah, agreed. I think he's just been a nice piece for the Marlins for the years that he's been, around. I don't think there's ever a ton of value with De La Cruz's profile in general, but the control is interesting. I think, he's a 3rd, 4th outfielder type dude, can do a little bit in left field, just about, but generally, he's, he is what he is. And, I think it's an interesting signal that the Marlins have moved on like pre-ARB. Like he's not even into ARB until this offseason. So I think that's interesting. And I do think that maybe links to some of the moves they've made. And maybe also that they want to get a look at some guys. You got to think who else is in this organization right now. And we think, is it Griffin Conine season? I think that's kind of where my head goes as well, is like probably Griff's going to get maybe a shot here, August, September. I know I saw Victor Mesa Jr. exited the game yesterday or the day before. Must have been Sunday. Couldn't have been. I don't know. They don't play on Mondays, do they? So, must have been Sunday. I think Victor Mesa Jr. exited. So, maybe Griffin Conan's going to get a look, maybe 1 or 2 of these newer prospects. Just to kind of go back to Josh Bell, I forgot to ask you this at the time. Who's going to get a look in at first base? What's that going to look like in the coming days? I know Berger's had a little bit of a stint there, but, it's likely they're going to bring up a first baseman who, considering they've added a few prospects that could play first base. You've also got Troy Johnson. You've got maybe a few others. Are you anticipating to maybe get the majority of reps at first base for the Marlins the rest of this way? Yeah,
you're right in the fact that Berger's going to see some time over there. And yeah, the Marlins are bringing in all these different players, but ultimately, if you look at Bell moving, especially, and of course, to the same degree, De La Cruz, it is a case of these aren't just trades to trade. They are opening up these spots for other players. So it'll be interesting to see if you look at who's on the 40-man that's going to be playing there. I mean, Tristan Gray is an option. So it is a case of like infield wise, it's not much to be excited by. I think the outfielders are definitely where the excitement is. I think you're absolutely right with Conine. I expect to see him up. I think I saw Mish respond to a question asked to him. Did he expect to see Conine up this year? And it was a one word answer. Yes. There we go. I think Victor Mesa Jr. will be up. I think Styles will be up pretty quickly as well. Because he's going to be 27 and opening next year. As far as roster manipulations, what's the point? You've got
there's no point.
He's going to be 32, 33 before he gets to free agency. So let's get him up there right now. But
100%. I think he probably will. I think Stowers will probably be like pretty much straight onto the active roster once the dust is settled in this on these moves. I think why not? For sure.
But ultimately, it is a case of like there are going to be some positions at the moment, like first base, where it's going to be a pretty unappealing option day in, day out. So there's a lot of excitement in this lineup for the last 2 months. But of course, we're trading everybody, so there are going to be some. Well, there were holes in the lineup on opening day, so there's certainly going to be some holes in the lineup going forwards.
Yeah, just want to double check. By the way, just checking the pulse on this one. Is this a rebuild? By the way.
I love that this is still a question and an option. Yes, this is a rebuild. Whether you want to say, they've not traded Sandy yet, this is just a retool. Look, the team are going to lose 100 games next year. And they're not going to turn that into a 90-win season the next year. Whether you want to call this a rebuild or a retool or restructuring really doesn't matter. However, whatever buzzword you want to use, if you've been in a company during one of these, you know what it is. You don't need to be given the right terminology. This is a rebuild. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, for sure. It could be a very interesting off season. It could be a very interesting deadline next time around as well. Like there's still like some pieces to, that the Marlins have, right, that exist in this organization, many of them currently on the IL. And so we'll wait to see. Let's hit the final piece. No more expectations here. There's no things that should drop at this point. There's still a couple of things trickling through across the league, but not from a Marlins perspective. Huascar Brazoban traded to the Mets. Late deal. This was a buzzer. It was at the buzzer, Brazoban. And I must say, someone shared Brazoban's Savant profile earlier on Twitter. And man, oh man, like if you didn't know the name, like you would have thought and assumed this was like one of the elite closers in the game. Like Brazoban's Savant is looking unreal. But he ends up going to the Mets. The Marlins get him back. Wilfredo Lara. Listen, I'm a big West Indies cricket fan from back in the day. So, the Lara name with Brian Charles Lara, a lot of synergy with that. I quickly looked up Wilfredo Lara's stats just, while we're on here. I'm not overly enthused by what I've seen from that thus far. Maybe doing the, Wilfredo a bit of a disservice, but, it looks to be struggling a touch this year in high A. But actually performed pretty well in A-ball last year. What are you making of Wilfredo Lara? This one feels a little bit, I don't know, like let's just make a deal for a deal's sake, to be honest with you. But where's your head of this one? Am I doing Mr. Lara a disservice?
I think a little bit. I'm struggling now not to remember Brian Lara cricket on the PlayStation 1.
Absolutely. I knew you'd be thinking that.
Absolutely.
What a game. What a game. Yeah.
Yeah. Bit of power, bit of speed. Ultimately he did have a good year last year in A. 122 WRC plus for what that matters. His numbers are pretty similar this year. Same walk rate, same K rate. The speed's still there. The power's just been sapped a little bit. Obviously, there's not enough information right now. Maybe he might have got nicked up. He might have had a pull here or whatever, a hit by pitch. power being sapped can happen sometimes with a niggling injury or whatever. So, the rest of the numbers are all still there. Look, it's Brazoban. Brazoban is, we've only just got him back, haven't we? We've only just got him back in the country. So
he had some visa issues. I think there was some concerns about the date of birth.
Yeah, 2 years.
Reminds me of some, Nigerian Premier League footballers from back in the day where there was definitely some question marks. But yeah, I think there was a date of birth issue with Brazoban finally in the country. But to be fair, he's performed again. Like this guy, Oscar Brazoban, kind of came out of nowhere. Was part of the pen last year. As all the pen last year, it kind of was like heavily overworked. It was such a pen team last year. But Brazoban, effective in many ways. I'm interested to see what he can do in the Mets. Wilfredo Lara, you add another guy, a high A guy. I think that's been the main takeaway here with Bendix, and I'll kind of like let you give yours. But my main, the main takeaway here is they definitely nailed some of these deals. But overall, when we reflect on the body of prospects back, not just in these deals, we've got to include obviously the Jazz deals, Arias deals, Birdie deals, like all of this that's happened this year. It is, scattered in terms of the ages and the ETAs, let's say. So, the Marlins are really kind of spreading their risk across multiple windows almost here, just trying to kind of fill it out and just see what they can do. So they've got a lot of volume back, Sean. There's just no denying that. Like they've moved a lot. They've got a lot back. It's over to, the player development now. Bendix has done what he can. It's over to the development to keep it rolling. But yeah, we reflect on it now, Sean. What's been your main takeaway? Obviously, we haven't spoken about Jazz directly. We haven't, I've done a couple of podcasts around that. So maybe just give you a sense on the Jazz deal as well. Actually, be interested to get your view on the Marlins moving him at this juncture, what they got back in return, and, obviously early impressions with Jazz in New York as well.
Yeah, third baseman Jazz Chisholm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm not shocked by the trade. Again, if we're calling this a rebuild or retool or restructuring, whatever you want to call it, Jazz was probably going to be part of that. And look, the Marlins came out and said, look, we're not going to just trade him for a bucket of balls. We're going to want people that we're interested in. You're going to have to come and get it. And to be fair, the Yankees kind of did. Like the names that they got back, there's a lot of excitement. And as you said, this is a case of like the deadline here is a lot like the draft in my eyes, where they've gone for quantity, not over quality, but they've been a particular direction between we need to restock this prospect ranking that we have with just people.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the Marlins were very light there. So I think now that that's all over, I'm really interested to see how the team obviously develop them, but what Bendix does next year, because that's really interesting to me. That's where I think the Marlins really will make moves that actually look like these are Bendix moves. Yeah, I think Bendix has now gotten to the situation where he's really understanding what the team have at the major league and at the minor league level, and where those deficiencies are. And of course, now he's building towards 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line. So he needs to know what he's got now and how that's going, how he projects that. He'll have a year in his mind of this is when we want to compete. So I think the Marlins will actually have he'll have more chance to put his stamp on this organization. You need to give him draft after draft, deadline after deadline for him to get his real, like, this is my team now, this is my organization. I've gotten rid of what doesn't fit my profile, and this is my profile. So this sort of scattergun way of the draft and the deadline, I think this is him just trying to clear the decks and put these people in place, and he'll build these people with these tools that they've got in the way that he wants to build this team. So I think we shouldn't judge him so quickly. But I would say that this deadline is certainly shown a lot of people. I'm seeing a lot of positives. I'm seeing a lot of people turn around and say, I was wrong. This guy knows what he's doing. He's cooking. So I'm actually infused by this deadline that Bendix is now really, really like he's taken a sledgehammer to this organization and really mixed it up and said, this is my organization. I'm putting my name on it. I'm not just a guy here that's just going to go through the motions. I'm actually going to do something.
It's a good shout. It's the reality is, we should be measured at the big league level. That's what it all comes down to. That's what it's about. And this year it's underperformed. Next year it's going to underperform as well. And the question is when will it start to perform? And that's how Bendix should always be measured. I feel like at times, to your point, a lot of celebration. I was wrong about Bendix, etc., etc. But we just don't know at this point. It's impossible to say. But what we do know is the big league team is absolutely flamed out this year, and then they've made these moves. And you can celebrate a great deadline all you want. There's some people here than prospects that we like, but you've been a fan longer than me. This is my second rebuild. You've had a few more. There's many other guys on Twitter that have had a lot more. Rebuilds. It's tough. It's going to be, we're going to be in the trenches for the next 18 months with probably subpar production on the big league field, which in this market isn't optimal. We can't get away from that either, that like the South Florida baseball market needs sustained success. And frankly, that isn't going to be the case for a while. So, Fish on First have put together a great deadline summary that I'm going to just read off here, just to recap what we've done, because they've done this in a perfect way. Eli Sussman's always on it. So, Sean, when we pull it all together here, the Marlins have traded away Jazz Chisholm Jr., Trevor Rogers, Tanner Scott, AJ Puck, Brian De La Cruz, Josh Bell, Brian Hoeing, Huascar Brazoban, and JT Chargois. All of them guys gone at the deadline effectively. We're going to lump in Jazz and AJ Puck into that. You could include Luis Ariz in that mix and, really bulk this out. In return, the total return for all them guys, Jay Bashirs, Wilfredo Lara, Davison De Los Santos, Garrett Forrester, Yoon Seok Shim, Adam Mazur, Connor Norby, Graham Pauly, Andrew Pinter, Abraham Ramirez, Augustin Ramirez, Will Schomburg, Jared Cerner, Robbie Snelling, Kyle Stowers, $2.25 million of cash. Boy, oh boy, I did say, Sean, this is a career-defining week for Peter Bendix. I think he's given himself a chance to define his career. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is a case of he has now put his stamp on this organization. Those names that you just read out, I mean, if anyone listening can claim to have known any of those names more than two, which is Norby and Stowers, like if you can't. They are simply names that before today you'll have never seen. And obviously that's, you can't keep track of 10,000 prospects from every single organization. But this is the beginning, in my eyes, of Bendix saying, this is my club. Mm-hmm. And this is how he will be judged. I mean, we can all say, you just mentioned my over 20 years now of being a Marlins fan. We can always say, oh, well, they shouldn't have to keep doing this / rebuild if only the owner had more money. Well, that's not the world we live in. So people talking about we shouldn't get excited because of the beginning of all these names coming back in the rebuild. This is all we have. We're like, the Marlins are never going to be one of those big clubs spending cash left, right, and center. So when the rebuild happens, you have to get excited about these players because these are the players that are going to begin the process of this team moving forwards to the next window. So, yes, we're going to have to be excited by these names because if these names don't work, then that's 12 months down the line before the rebuild can start, the rebuild can get moving in the right direction. This is day one, in my eyes, of us moving towards that next window. Yeah,
absolutely. And we're going to see. And I think there's a few names in here that we're going to see sooner rather than later. And that's the main takeaway here is the profile of player. There's a different type of profile that's been added at the deadline that wasn't being added in the draft, in the earlier moves. And so it's encouraging. And actually, there's some really interesting profiles, some power hitting profiles in there, particularly. And so, I'm going to be very closely watching, Davison de los Santos, think, how quickly he's up. For me, this deadline, I think, really hinges on whether the catcher can catch from the Yankees, whether the power hitting catcher can catch. I think if he can, then we'll look really fondly back on this deadline. I think if that catcher, it becomes, if he can't catch, then I definitely look through a different lens. I think when you've got a power hitting catcher, then that's one thing. If you've got a power hitting DH, then that is looked at very differently, in my opinion. So, it's going to come down to him, but I think, the return from the Trevor Rogers deal, I think, looks enticing. There's definitely some interesting arms from the Padres. And again, this is the point, is like the Marlins, they've demonstrated time and again that they can take guys from the West Coast, pitchers, and they can turn it around. And I think particularly one of those prospects, maybe even both of them from the Padres, the arms, slightly underperforming, projectable guys that are underperforming. They're the types of guys I love seeing the Marlins take, because there's a track record of being able to switch it around. So, Sean, overall, how are you feeling as a fan now? Considering where we were in 23, considering the pain we've been through this year, the change of front office, the uncertainty moving forward in some ways around Skip, just generally, how are you feeling? Just give me that sense now at this point of, where Sean Barrett's head's at.
I think the word uncertainty works as well here, in the sense of some of that's gone now. Like, as little as I expected this not to happen, just having, you're waiting and you've always got that concern of, like, what if we trade everyone and we don't get anything good in return or anything exciting? Ultimately, my main interest, obviously winning is part of it, but my main interest when I put on the Marlins game is I want to be entertained.
Me too.
So my main concern was, what happens if they trade everybody and we get 17 to 18-year-olds back? That's not happened. And yeah, Skip is concerned for me, because
me too.
Whenever you've got that decision to be made, you've got uncertainty. It's always just nagging away at you. I think Skip. Yeah. I'll be interested. I think maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not gone. No. It's not a case of he's a free agent at the end of the year. They've still got an opportunity to keep him on. And it'll be interesting to see what his opportunities are. I think if he has a fairly decent major league offer, then he probably will be gone. We know that he's not an East Coast guy, but if his best options are bench coach somewhere or a base coach somewhere, maybe he'll be convinced to stay on for a couple more years, and then who knows? If this is, depending on how long this window of a rebuild is, I was expecting 2, 3, 4 years. I was expecting the Sandy window to be over. I still kind of do, because the number's quite high at the end of this contract. But who knows? The Marlins are piecing together a couple of pieces here and there that are going to be at the major league level opening day, or should we going to see some of them before that? So uncertainty is the perfect word. We've cleared up quite a lot of it with this deadline, but there's still a lot to happen over the next couple of months into this off season. As always, for you, this is perfect. There's plenty of talking points for you.
No doubt about it. We love talking points on the daily pod about the Marlins. No doubt about that. I'm very interested to see how things pan out with Skip Schumacher. What I must say, final kind of topic, I guess, before we round this one up, but Skip Schumacher, just the way that he has handled himself this season is exemplary. I'm a huge fan of Skip Schumacher, always have been. And this, it's easy to be a good manager when the team's, winning games and you're on a playoff run, and it's easy. But I must say, he's been even more impressive this year, in my opinion, than last year. And boy, oh boy, he's one hell of an asset. And what to your point, I think this is where maybe our heads are going, is all of a sudden, if this isn't like a full-blown bare cupboard next year, then maybe Skip sees it differently, particularly if there isn't like an obvious opportunity on the table for him. And so we'll wait to see what happens in the offseason, wait to see how the other clubs pan out. If someone drastically underperforms and they want to make a move and make a change, maybe that creates opportunity for Skip. But I look across like the contenders right now, and the teams are in it that I expect to be in it predominantly. And so, I don't really know whether there's going to be many managerial openings. And so, like for Skip, to your point, do I go and bench coach it somewhere instead where I want to be more geographically? Or do I still want one of the top jobs? There's only 30 of these. So do you want one of them on a team that could be fun, particularly if De Los Santos is up, Ramirez is up, the two guys back from the Orioles are up, who knows? It could be a fun, like if Sandy's back, the rotation's back. I mean, Bendix is going to have to cook the bullpen this offseason, no doubt. But we've already seen how he can do it. We've already seen that, bullpens can be built out of nothing. And that's the beauty. That's why it makes total sense to sell these guys off, because come the offseason, there'll be a load of Rule 5 guys knocking around. You'll make a couple of little minor deals with the Rays, with like the big farm system guys, and you'll piece together a pen, because that's what Bendix does. That's what the Rays do. So, the pen's going to be a bit interesting the rest of the way. I think the Marlins are going to have multiple blowies along the way. But nevertheless, come the offseason, it's going to be interesting. Sean, we're going to wrap it up there. 51 minutes of action there. And that has been 6 trades, 7 players from the big league roster moved today. If we extrapolate that outwards, that also, it comes to 9 if we include Jazz and AJ Puk. So a lot of movement from this roster. The 2023 roster is officially gone. Remaining is Jesus Sanchez, Nick Fortes, Jake Berger, and Andrew Nardi. I think that's basically it. So, guys, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. I hope you've enjoyed this deadline review. Appreciate we moved at a fast pace across through these trades. I think as we get into the coming days, we'll probably deep dive on a few of these in a bit more detail. But Sean Barrett, unreal performance from you, mate, trying to dig into those fringe prospects on the fly when clearly I know nothing about them. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow. Further recaps. The Marlins also play a game. I think they've just started as well, actually, against the Rays. I think, anyway. So they are just about to play the Rays, which is very interesting. The lineup is there. I've no idea who's in the bullpen, so it could be a tough day. But Edward Cabrera, I think, going for the Marlins. They're probably going to need the bullpen. See you tomorrow, guys.